So, Ryan Hall, matchmaker for Fusion Fight League, episode 2. Here we go. So, Ryan, you guys just got done with Rising Stars 2, and just kind of wanted to go over that with you on what that was looking like.
It was a great night. You and I talked beforehand, and on paper, it looked like one of the best cards to ever come to Montana, and it lived up to the billing. We had
Just
3 or 4 decisions. 2 of them were split. I can't tell you the last time there was a 10 or 9 fight card in Montana where there was 2 split decisions on it. I mean, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, for sure. I caught up and I watched the rest of the fights later on, but there was Wi-Fi problems on the bus coming back from my tournament. Up until the intermission, those fights were really good fights.
And that tells you something too. When the first half of a card before the intermission is really good, then that can only tell you where you're growing, because we put our pros, we put our titles, all those things later in the card. So to have it be that good that early really kind of tells you what type of night it was.
I know. So first up, Jake from my team, I had him going, and his mustache, nice and filthy. His opponent, I didn't know the guy. I knew he was a high school wrestler, but that was a good fight. I was expecting, honestly, Jake, because he's been experienced. He hasn't really he hasn't gotten the fights, but he's always training. So I thought it was going to be over first, second round, but turned out to be a good fight.
Yeah, that was a really good fight. Jake handled himself very, very well, but and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we always say no easy fights. That's our motto. And even the early fights, we try to keep that way. And I try to match everyone even, and I don't think anyone would argue that fight wasn't as even as it could be.
Yeah, for sure. I was expecting a lot more takedown attempts. Being a wrestler, being from Missoula, those guys, Missoula is a really, really tough wrestling school where he came from. But you didn't see it. They wanted to bang on the feet.
And they did. That was the thing that impressed me. They both traded some shots and kept coming forward and smiling at each other throughout the fight, which is just awesome to watch.
I know. And didn't Jingle Bells hit you up and basically say, "Hey, I'm going for that title. I'm coming for it"?
He hasn't told me that yet, but he said as soon as he's ready from this one that he wants another fight. So at 1-1, he's got to come out and get a couple fights. I know we're going to talk a little later of how you get a title shot. He's certainly on the radar, but you got to get out there, get some experience, and keep climbing that ladder.
Yeah, absolutely. So next up was kind of surprising to me with Sturcio. Hell of a fight though.
I tell you what, I'm going to let you behind the curtain a little bit here. So after that fight, I walked up to the team doctor, and I said, I'm pretty sure you have 2 new patients after that, but the one thing you don't have to check is their heart, because that entire third round was all heart. There was no gas tank. There was no technique left. It was pure will. You saw the fight. It was 2 deep breaths, throw a haymaker, swear at yourself that you didn't knock him out, and wait because one was coming right back at you. It was easily the most entertaining round of the night, even if it wasn't the most technical.
Yeah, they were both dead, and speaking of heart, man, I thought Eric was out in the first round, but he just kept banging, kept going at it, and I was like,
and Greffy just walked into right hands and left hands from Eric repeatedly and kept coming back for more. Both those guys just didn't know what quit meant, almost to a fault. It was one of those where you started feeling bad for the guys, but man, they were not going to quit for anything. You had to put them down, and they couldn't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they were both very, very similar fighters on... It's just straightforward. There's no...
It wasn't the most technical fight of the night, and neither of those guys would be ashamed of me saying that. They just both came out, and it was rock'em sock'em robots to see who would drop, and neither one did. And I believe that was one of the split decisions, and that was a tough call. That was a heck of a fight, and could have gone either way.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, third fight up was that the Merrill fight?
It was.
Yep. That fight was a scrap. I had Meryl on that one, and just didn't go her way at all. But
I wouldn't say that. I got to give her credit because I think I haven't seen all the sheets, but I think at least one of the judges had the first round for Meryl. Like, I mean, she handled herself very well in the first round. I thought Lauren would come in, might overpower her. That didn't happen. They were very, very even. Meryl was not pushed around in there at all. She did very good positioning with her hips and to stay out of trouble. And even though she was on the ground, she definitely kept control of that and was in a safe spot the whole time and was in control of what was going on. The second round, that wasn't as true. She got in a bad spot and made a mistake. And with a fighter like Lauren, you can't do that at all. So while it didn't go Meryl's way, I wouldn't say at all because I think it definitely played out well enough for both fighters. I think both girls could walk out of the cage with their head held high on that one.
Yeah, they were huge at 45. They both looked really good.
35.
35. My bad. They both their last fights were at 45, correct? I believe.
Correct. Lauren normally fights 140. She took a last minute at 145, and then but she's always wanted 135. This is the first time she made it, and she made the weight at 132 and a half, I believe it was. And Meryl came in at 136. You get a 1 pound allotment, so she's well within her range there. But both of those girls walk a lot heavier than that, and they both came in the cage a lot heavier than 135. And it was an interesting fight because both of them are used to being able to outpower their opponents, and they couldn't do that here. Neither one of them could have a power advantage over the other one, which I think was a big key, is that they could not just come in and impose their will, put them up against the cage like they both have in the past.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So after that fight, was that intermission after that fight, or was there one more?
No, we went 5 before intermission.
5 more.
2 more fights.
Yeah, 2 more. So next up was, I'm drawing a blank here.
I'd have to look at the card. I believe it was the first title fight of the night, but I can't remember.
Was it? Would it have? Oh, it was supposed to be. Was it supposed to be the Dennis fight? Or
no, the Dennis was like 7th. I'm looking right now, so if you see me looking off screen and kind of holding my phone up, I'm trying to get you the answer. I expected the interviewer to be more prepared, man. I'm telling you.
My bad.
That was Almir and Ryder.
I was excited for that fight, but it ended in the first round. I thought there was going to be a lot of action, but that
says something about Almir because I mean you've seen Ryder, and anyone who's seen Ryder, that man is slick on the mat. He is very talented, one of the top jiu-jitsu practitioners in MMA in the state. I mean, he's hung with Brandon Hegstead in the past. He out jiu-jitsu'd Kyle Ney, who's an excellent practitioner. So I expected a lot, and Almir just caught him and beat him in his own game a little bit, and I was pretty impressed. You don't see that happen very often to Ryder.
Yeah, that just shows. Yeah, Almir, he's like that's a different level, honestly. Like that first round, wow. Ryder afterwards.
He took it right to Ryder and did it to him in Ryder's game, which is what you don't see a lot in MMA. Usually you say, okay, Kai's a really good wrestler, I'm going to make him stand up. You don't say, hey, he's really good on the ground, let's see how good. And that's exactly what Almir did, and it shocked all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so 155, we've talked a little bit, and that is just a jiu-jitsu filled weight class. That is crazy.
It is. Brandon Hegstead, Kyle Ney, Ryder Small, now Almir. The top 4 guys in that division will all bend your arm in all sorts of funny, funky ways that will not feel good.
Yeah. So, how many fights has Almir fought? Not necessarily with you guys, but what?
Right. He's 4-0 overall.
4-0.
One with us and a couple with Front Street Fights.
Okay.
Really good promotion out in Idaho.
Yeah, for sure. So then next fight up we had
Riley and Barb took us into the intermission.
Yep, that was I liked that fight. I had Riley Timon. I had her to win. I saw her fight Lauren in at Fights Under the Lights, and that was a brawl, like back and forth the whole way. Wasn't the Meryl and Wolf fight? Wasn't that fight the number 1 contenders?
For 135.
For 135.
That's for 135. And Barb, who fought Riley, is our 135 champion. That's why it's easy to get confused.
Oh, okay.
Barb's the one that will meet Lauren in the future, but that'll be at 135. Barb bounces between the two. I think she's a better, stronger 135er. Tends to be bigger than her opponent.
Okay.
She wasn't bigger than Riley here. I mean, Riley and Barb on the poster looked almost exactly the same. It's again what we saw before is Barb's used to kind of having power over her opponent. Really didn't have that this time. And so I think that was kind of part of it. The other thing is, I don't know what it was, Barb traveled 16 hours from this fight out of Colorado Springs. They drove 16 hours in bad weather. And I think that had a factor in it. I've seen Barb fight 3 times now. She usually comes out kind of on fire and pressures her opponent. And she came out flat. And her coach, will tell you that. And she'll tell you that. She just came out a lot flatter than usual. And Riley took advantage of it and really made it her fight. And credit to her. I mean, she's a great person, a great champ. And I think it was a great fight. And I think it was well-deserved.
So, how many fights does that bring Riley to? Because I know she's tough, man. Like, have you heard?
5-1 now, I want to say. I talked to her afterwards. She's willing to come back and defend it. My guess is it's 1 or 2 defenses, and that girl's going pro. There's not a lot of 145 amateurs, and I think she's one of the top ones in the Pacific Northwest. If someone's listening to this and disagrees with us, I'd love to find out and put someone against her. I'll tell you that right now.
Absolutely. So then intermission comes around. Well, first up, the Dennis fight. I was pretty bummed that it was unfortunate, but I mean.
And I don't ever want to disclose anyone's medical status because that's not my job. But for those who don't know, James Dennis is a gamer. He's fought only for Fusion. He's worked his way up, and he doesn't back out without legit reasons. He had some issues with ice and ended up tweaking something that made it so he could not properly defend his title, and he didn't want to risk the belt that way. And, it's Montana. Stepping on the ice, there's not much you can do about that. So that it was an unfortunate thing, but it was a legit injury. Here's some breaking news for you, Kai. December 13th in Billings, James Dennis will defend that belt against Danny Shine at Seasoned Beatings.
Okay.
So we're going to get that fight.
I
have to wait a month. But we're going to get that fight in December.
I'm going to try my absolute best to come down there. There's a possibility I have practice, which could restrict me from going down there. But that is a weekend that I have free, and I would love to come watch some fights before heading to Vegas.
Yeah, well, you're always welcome at any Fusion event, so it'd be great to have you.
Oh, yeah. So then intermission comes around. I love what you guys do, helping out the community. You had...
I'm going to back you up for 1 second. Something that I'm sure you saw because it was in the first half, but we didn't mention, and I just can't do it without mentioning it. I've got a friend, the Ross family, and Troy Ross, the little boy, 2 years ago, he had a serious illness diagnosed. He still has the illness, will have it his whole life, but serious diagnosis, and he was in our cage and was a fight for a cause 2 years ago. Looked much different because he was on steroids, and no one knew how long Troy would be around. And then they did a Troy Strong blood drive this summer, and we hopped on it piggyback and challenged all the gyms to give blood, and the winner will get a Troy Strong blood drive belt. And Troy got to walk to the cage between the second and third fight, right after Eric Sturchill's fight. Got to walk to the cage and present that to the team Wolfpack, your team, for giving the most blood. And we have to recognize Troy, and we have to recognize Wolfpack for what they did. One of Troy's treatments, every 6 weeks, I believe, he's got to have this treatment, and it takes 1,000 donors to make this dose of antibodies that he needs to take his for one treatment to keep it from his body from attacking his lungs as an invader. So everybody out there, if you see this, go give blood. Tell them it's for Troy Strong. It's within the Red Cross. They know all about it. But I think that's an important thing to mention that we kind of skipped over.
Yeah, for some reason I thought it was during intermission because that's what I was about to get after.
Intermission was when we did the fundraiser for a local woman that just found out she had lung cancer.
Yeah.
But we did the Troy walkout right after Eric's because that way Sean and Glenn were in the cage.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So, the lady that you guys were helping out, she was your ringside doctor a couple times, wasn't she?
She was a ringside nurse, assisted a doctor, and she's also tied in with the Staybridge, which is one of our longtime biggest sponsors. and I believe she just had her 30th birthday, and she's got a severe and rare form of lung cancer. So we raised money for her, and we were still getting some donations at the end of the night, but I know we raised well over $5,000 for her, and that's going to help her. She doesn't have insurance. This really will help her out, and that's what we do. That means we like having fights. We like having people come out in entertainment, but the big thing they do at Fusion, one of the reasons I got involved with it, is because every community, every show, we raise money for somebody dealing with something that is unthinkable.
Yeah, fight for a cause. I love it.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm sure you saw the Troy Strong belt thing. That was hard
loved
to
it.
not have a wet eye on that. I mean, Troy walking out and handing that belt, and then your gym giving the belt back to him to hold on for a year.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
I heard maybe watched or read a post on Facebook that said somebody contacted our team and said that he slept with the belt all night, and it was just a really cool deal that he got to keep the belt.
I wouldn't be surprised to do that. I had not heard that, but I walked down to check on him afterwards because he's a young boy, and I wanted to make sure everything was all right. And he was literally hugging the belt at the table.
Yeah, for sure.
So you guys, and he said to his mom, "Why do I have this? I didn't win anything." And I didn't have any fights. I didn't win a fight. And Sean Ibsen and his mom both have said that he's won a tougher battle and fights a tougher battle than will ever take place in that cage.
Yeah, no kidding. Especially being so young. That's
yeah. It hit him when he was 2, and he's friends with my family. We go and get Christmas trees together every year. Go cut down trees, and it was tough to see him go through that, but it's so great to see him come through it and really be an inspiration to people. There's people giving blood that never would have because of him. So it's a pretty powerful message. For
sure. So then we get after the intermission.
Yep.
This was
Jared and Noah.
Yeah. I had Jared.
You had Noah and
Noah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And Noah won that one, and I don't think you were able to see the fight. Jared really did well in that fight and really controlled some of it, but Noah did what champions do. He wasn't doing real well. I think it's safe to say that he may have been behind on the cards. I didn't see the cards, but he may have been. But he snatched up I have to look. I want to say it was a rear naked right at the end. And the official time of that was 2:59 of round 2. 1 second.
1 second.
On the clock. Yep, his corner was saying, don't tap, and he just got to where I'm guessing the eyes started getting black on Jared, and he tapped, and I mean, literally as his hand moved, you heard ding, but the tap happened before, and Noah walks out with that belt, and that's what champions do.
That's wild.
When you see something, you take a hold of it, but 2:59 of round 2, I mean, and I told Jared that was a valiant effort, and he's welcome back in our cage anytime, and you'll see Noah defending our cage again. It's going to be hard getting that belt off that man. He is a dangerous, dangerous man.
That's crazy. 259. So I've lost matches in the last second of matches before, and it's like that's heartbreaking. Like that. Oh, that's something you gotta live with until you get another shot at it. And it's like, wow, 1 second.
But Jared will be back. He'll be back, and we may not have seen the last of that one. He's got to win a couple and kind of earn that spot. He took it on last minute notice when we had an injury to Chaz. So, I mean, he didn't have time to prepare. You got to take that into it too. But man, Noah just saw a little opening I don't think anyone else saw, and he took it hard and fast, and came through with a W. And that's what champions do, man. And whether they're winning or losing, they're always dangerous. And it's going to take something pretty phenomenal to take that strap off of Noah.
Yeah, absolutely. So then next fight up, we have the first pro bout of the night.
And before we get there, one thing we have to mention that I think is really important is how good the quality of gyms are. I don't think you probably can put this together, but that's 3 belts around SBG Idaho from that one night alone.
Yeah.
You got Almir, you got Riley, and you got Noah.
I watched
one night.
SBG Idaho. I mean, all SBGs, in my opinion, are good, but that SBG in Idaho, I watched Kyle Frost fight Gage Saunders, and Gage Saunders is a bad dude, and that, like, it's a different level, man. SBG is crazy.
Yep, no, absolutely. I agree with you there. Absolutely. Okay, go ahead. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So on to the pro fight.
You're good. So, first pro fight of the night, I had... is it the Lemire fight?
Yep.
Carlos. So
Carlos and Dylan. Yep.
Carlos and Dylan. So I heard Dylan might not be did he go to the ER afterward? Like that was not. Yeah.
Eric and Dylan both had hospital visits. Obviously, I can't get into details, HIPAA and medical stuff.
Yep.
I heard he's doing all right. I messaged him. He told me he's doing better, but he did have some medical issues, and but he did tell me he was okay. So that's the important part.
That's good.
That part I can't share.
Yep. So I just read some Facebook posts around people asking. So that's good that he's
more
okay.
on Facebook than what I can say, but
yeah, absolutely.
He did tell me and message me and say he was okay. And that was a heck of a fight. Dylan, I got to give it to Carlos because Dylan had him knocked out probably twice.
Yeah.
And both times Carlos went down, Dylan jumped in to finish him, and Carlos put both feet in his chest and pushed him back. And I was talking with Dave Evans, the referee, yesterday, and I saw Dave, and he ran in. His hand was coming up to stop that, and Carlos made a defensive move, and he stopped it. And stopped moving in to stop the fight. So he kept it going. And then the next time, he did the same thing, and Dylan went in for a finish, and Carlos did the same thing. 2 feet on the chest, pushed him back, and Dave backed in again. Dave said both cases, amateur fights, those would have been stopped, and if Carlos hadn't made that move, he was done. But both times, he still showed he was with it and defended, and Dave's like, all right, I'll let you go. And he came back and took that win, and it was impressive.
So, Dylan, I think I watched him fight one time at Fights Under the Lights, and it was a battle, and then he had a lucky right hand, knocked his guy clean out. Was that the right fight that I'm thinking about?
It may be. I've seen so many fights that it kind of blend without looking back to it. But Dylan only lost 1 or 2 as an amateur. Took Johnson to Sona, gave him all he wanted to have. He was a tough enough champion in Colorado. He's a bad dude. He's won some state wrestling titles, which don't come easy. So he's a bad dude.
Yeah. So the Lemire fight was next.
Delane Lemire and Kerry Latimer.
Yeah, I had Latimer on that one just because that was a bold statement. Latimer just he likes to fight. He loves to throw hands, and he won't back down to very many. So I kind of went for the underdog in that situation.
He took a different strategy here. He took a real different strategy here. He came in, took Delane down repeatedly. This was a split decision again. This was another split. And I heard people that thought it went the other way, but if that fight was in Idaho, it might have gone the other way. But it's tough to come into a hometown and take a fight. Delane was very active. Delane was very exciting. Delane was landing strikes, outstriking him, doing really, really well. But Kerry took him down and laid on him, and Delane couldn't get out. So it's an argument between aggressiveness and damage and control. And it's tough. Different set of judges, you never know. So that was a really, really close, really good fight. Both those guys will be back in our cage. Both of them earned a return trip.
That's good to hear. So that brings us to the main event. Tommy McMillan.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I actually got messaged by a few people after I said that I was not gonna pull for Tommy, and even in.
Well, let's be clear. That's not what you said. You said you're pulling for Tommy, but you picked Ben.
Yeah. So
you were pulling for Tommy.
Yeah.
You just.
Yeah, because he's a Montana wrestler. He's a wrestler from my hometown, and I had to go for him. But he wrestled. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was either 160 or 170 as a high school senior wrestler.
Yeah, I think it was 160, but something like that.
And the older you get, I hear, the harder it is to cut weight. And this fight was going to be at 135. That just blew my mind.
He held our 170 amateur title. He held 155 for another promotion. He's fought at 145 once, so no one knew how he was going to look or recover or react to this. And the way he reacted was took a 3-0 pro and just controlled him and dominated him and won in the first round.
Yeah, that was wild. So that's good for him. That's going to really.
Ben shot for a takedown, got stuffed, and Tommy used that to put him in a real compromising position, and eventually got him where he needed to, and took the choke and walked out of there with a very important, very impressive victory. It's not a lot of folks who make their pro debut against a 3-0 at a new weight class and walk out in the first round with a W.
So, do you think he's going to stay at 35, or do you think he's going to fluctuate around?
I think he's going to stay at 35. I mean, if the right fight came at 45, would he take it? I'm sure. If he gets a Dana White contender call and it's 45, I'm sure he'll take it.
Yeah.
But I think if he's given the option, if he calls me tomorrow and says, find me a fight, it'll be at 35.
Okay, that's really good. So,
Why wouldn't he after that performance?
That's crazy. That was just gonna push his career. Like, had he lost, had he won, like he's a great fighter. Like he's gonna go somewhere with the sport. But like beating a 3-0 right off the bat, you can't really
from a legit gym.
You can't really
at
get
a
better
new weight
than
class like that. That moved his career up a couple steps on the ladder for sure.
For sure. So you're
And I mean, Infusion has sent people to the UFC. We've sent people to Bellator. We've sent people to Invicta. So I mean, we are a promotion that does send people there. So it's certainly something people watch our shows and are aware of it. So I'm sure he's on the map for sure.
Before we move on, Sean Ibsen just commented, Jake and his mustache will dominate. His mustache was pretty dirty. Little Movember going on.
Yeah, maybe it distracted his opponent a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it got Brady out of his game a little bit to have that giant caterpillar to deal with. I don't know.
Speaking of distracting your opponents, the video that comes out of him in our gym squatting the heavy bag while in a jockstrap and sunglasses with the
Eric
mustache.
Stoicchio is staring at him.
Staring. It wasn't even...
Yeah.
Oh, just... He was
These
locked
are your
on.
teammates, man. Just remember that. These are your teammates.
I know. Rough. So you're a matchmaker for Fusion. What goes on a little bit into doing that kind of stuff? I mean, because there's a lot of things you got to look at.
It's a lot harder than people think. There's a lot of things you got to take into effect. I mean, first off, I get a lot of messages, I want to fight this guy or that guy, and they're 30 pounds away. Well, that doesn't work. So first you got to do weight class. Then I get guys who've only fought a couple times and they want title shots, and you got to work your way up there. So, and I talked before, we do no easy fights. So you try not to give anyone a fight where they're going to be overmatched or where they're going to overmatch someone, because no one learns from those fights. So we try to let people progress and work their way up. And we talked about James Dennis a little earlier. He's one that he debuted for us 2 years ago in Shoto at 205 pounds. And worked his way up. He got to 3-0, lost a few. One point had a losing record, worked his way back to 500. Finally got that title shot he'd been chasing for over a year and made the most of it. That's what I like to do. I like to build people up, find where your limits are, find who you can and can't beat, challenge you, and work your way through. So that's the first step, is trying to find good matchups. The next is style. You try to find two styles that work together to make for an entertaining match. I want the fighters to have a good time. I want them to be able to develop. But at the end of the day, people's got to buy tickets and want to see the fight. So you want to find ones where it puts people in there. Usually strength against strength is what we try to do more than anything, until you get to those title eliminator type fights. But you'll see wrestlers against wrestlers. You'll see BJJ guys against BJJ guys. Strikers against strikers. They're the most exciting. They're the most fair. They're the most even. Until you start wanting belt shots, then you're going to fight whoever else is ranked right up there with you. So that goes into it. And then you've got schedules and time and gym affiliations. This guy may be really good against this guy, but one is SBG Kalispell, one's SBG Idaho. That's not going to work. Yeah. So, there's a lot of things like that. Take a lot of things into it, and then you got to work around schedules. People are students like yourself. People work. People coach high school wrestling. People have jiu-jitsu tournaments. People have kids. A lot of things go into it to figure it out. I usually start with about 50 or 60 names to get a card of 10 fights with 20 fighters.
Okay. 10 cards, 20. So
10 fights, 20 fighters.
10 fights, 20 fighters. Yeah. So, like, one of the worst things that can happen to you is, well, not the worst thing, but people pulling out of fights. I mean, there's a lot of good reasons.
There are. We've had legit injuries that happen all the time.
Do you have any good stories of terrible excuses? Because I'm sure there are.
My favorite was in Shoto last year. I got a call, and the guy says, "Hey, I'm and he's a brand new fighter. Was going to be fighting another debut. I think it was actually 2 years ago. It was the same show that James Dennis debuted on. The guy calls me and says, "Hey, I'm not going to make it." I said, "Okay, why not?" And he's from one of the small towns up on the High Line. I said, "Okay, why not?" He says, "My dog ate my mouth guard and my cup." I've never heard my dog ate my cup, but I have now heard that. That's a new one. I've also had fighters who don't fight for us anymore. One called me and was going through this whole story of being pulled over, and the cops were coming to his door with guns, and he had to go and hang up. And then he's posting on Facebook an hour later, checking in at stores and Billings. So obviously the gunpoint arrest didn't take very long.
Wow, that's wild. So if somebody's gonna pull out of a fight, what do you have like deadlines? That
Yeah,
like,
well, basically once you accept to fight, once you say, yeah, I'm going to fight John Doe, at that point you're locked in. If you pull out for anything other than an injury with a doctor's note, or I call it case-by-case circumstances. If your mother's really sick and you're in the hospital with her, I'm not going to hold you to it. But, I mean, things like that. And we've also had people that got calls from bigger promotions, and we've let them out for those things. But once you've committed to a fight, if it's not a doctor's note or some other legitimate excuse that you and I agree that is legitimate, you're suspended by us and also by Fight Force. We have agreement, and Sparta Combat also has an agreement with us that you're suspended by all three of us for 6 months your first time, and then 1 year your second time, and then lifetime after that.
okay.
So if you just call and say, hey, I can't get off work, my ride can't make it, I'm just not feeling up to fighting, I didn't get a good training camp, and you call the week of, that's going to be a problem. If you call me 5-6 weeks and say, hey, my training camp's not what I want it to be, we can work with you on that and figure something out. But when you call me on Tuesday of fight week and say, I really didn't like my training camp or the weight cut's not going well, fighters fight, man. That's what they do.
Yeah, but it's okay for you guys to call a fat, overweight Kai Stewart in 5 days' notice. No big deal.
I'd like to point out, I just told Sean we had an opening, and a fat, overweight Kai Stewart was beating down my door saying, I'll take that.
I know. I had to get it before somebody else did. I'm pretty sure.
So don't say we called you, because you're at the door begging to be let in.
I'm pretty sure I swiped that from Jake.
Yeah, I think you did actually. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you did.
But like, I was like, I'm doing it. I was like, Sean, I'm doing it. And then I messaged you personally before Sean could tell me no. And then after that, there was a few other times that Sean messaged the group chat, and like he'll mention, as long as your name is not Kai Stewart, who can take this fight? And I was like, oh, come on.
Yeah, well, after that you were in school. I mean, that literally was a couple days before you left, and you got to do what you're doing now, man, and then we'll get you back in there. But that's too important. You got to do what you're doing.
Yep. Speaking of matchmaking, Tyler Vogel says, I want my belt back.
I've been talking with Tyler. We're going to get him back in there. I like working with Tyler. He's a friend of mine. We've talked several times. We got to find the right opponent. We got to make everything work numbers-wise, all the stuff that goes into it. But I'd love to see Tyler come back and reclaim that strap and make a challenge on people.
So speaking of pro titles,
yes.
Like you guys don't have, like, is it hard to find pros? Like,
not really. It's hard to find pros that'll work. I've got one guy who's 23-2 with 4 Bellator fights that want to fight, and the other guy I have at his weight is 2-1 from Riverton, Wyoming. You know what I mean? Like, that happens a lot. And then you got flights, you've got pro pay, all those things that have to line up. But we do have a lot of our pro titles held, and held by some pretty big names. I mean, Joe Riggs holds the title for us. Roxanne Modafferi held our title before she had to vacate to go to the UFC. Always a good reason. So we've had a lot of big name pro title holders.
Speaking of vacating, is Joe Riggs going to vacate? Like,
he's retired as far as I know. Our rules are that it's for a year. If I had a couple people come up that wanted to fight for that 205 that he holds, or the 185, I'd give him a call and say, hey, Joe, are you cool? And I bet you he would be. My understanding, he's going to go into coaching pretty soon and start his own gym. So I think the fight chapter, at least in the U.S., is done. But we haven't had to cross that bridge yet, and it's kind of cool to put on your website that Joe Riggs is your title holder. So until we get a match booked, it'll be like that. But I'm sure that he'd be fine letting that belt get fought for.
Yeah, he's doing bare knuckles now.
Yep.
Overseas.
Yep.
So, speaking of bare knuckles, there's been, one bare knuckle MMA fight in Montana, which was
That's correct. Yep, it was
was
on a reservation fight. Yep.
Yeah. So, is there
One
a lot of
crazy
rules?
guy from Great Falls wants to do that for some reason. Hi, Sean.
So, is there like more rules that have to be followed, like, or is that just something that you can't find enough people to do?
Terrell and I talked about it, and it's basically a safety issue. we're trying to get to be one of the bigger promotions in the region and trying to get to certain places. And as such, you got to be careful with gimmick fights and things like that, and safety. And we put safety first. And bare knuckle MMA, while it's exciting, isn't the safest thing. And it's not something we're getting into full term. So we want to be known for the MMA fights that we put on and how good they are and that type of quality of thing. And we want to stay in our lane a little bit on that and do that better than anybody. And so that's what we're doing. So we just haven't gone that way. There's safety, the doctor saying your insurance goes up through the roof when you go bare knuckle. There's just a lot of factors that people don't think about on the business side. And then you got sponsors. Not every sponsor wants to have their name on a bare knuckle fight. So you got to be careful with some of those things. I know why Sean would want to do it, and from a fighter standpoint, I get it. But on the business side, it's a little different.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks, Kai. Just do it, Ryan. Bare knuckle is great. So you said that Fusion is growing to be one of the bigger in the Pacific Northwest. Do you is there rules against letting you guys go over state lines?
No, there isn't. You just want to make sure when you do it, you're ready and you're big enough. And the other thing is part of it is knowing your niche. Montana's our turf, and we're very proud of what we've done in Montana. I think we're the premier organization in Montana. Not slighting anyone else, just what we do. And it's one of those things that we're doing well, and there's more places in Montana to go. We want to go to Missoula. There's some other cities we're looking at to go, and I think you have to do those and do those well first before you start going over there. You look in Idaho, there's Front Street Fight. You look in Washington, there's Cage Sport. There's a lot of very good promotions out there that before you decide to cross over that fence and go into their lawn, you want to make sure that you're doing what you need to do first. So I think we're going to, I steal a line from my Penn State coach because I went to school at Penn State and I love Penn State football. And it's dominate the state. That's what he says about recruiting. Before we recruit anywhere else, they dominate the state. And I think that's what we got to do first. We got to dominate the state, do what we want to do with Montana first, and then those possibilities will come find us instead of us having to find them. And I think that's what you'll see. I mean, that's a question for Terrell when you have him on your show. But that's my opinion is let's dominate the state, then we'll spread our wings.
Okay, so there is Alan Rea, myself, the Billings kid. I can't think. There's a lot of, and the guy that fought Jacob Needles. There's all this young talent. Is that something fight organizations really like to see, or?
It is for us because we're a regional promotion. You look at Tommy McMillan; he might fight for us one more time, and then he's going to be in the bigger promotions and working his way up. He's going to be on LFA. He's going to be looked at Bellator. He's going to be looked at by UFC. So, I mean, Tommy McMillan, while I love the kid and he's amazing, he's not our long-term main event fighter because he won't be at our level. He's going to be at Bellator, UFC, and LFA very, very quickly. So what you do is you latch onto the Kai Stewarts of the world and you say, hey, Kai, let's build you up and let's work with you and let's do something. And so we do that. And we get you for 4 or 5 amateur fights and 3 or 4 pro fights before you get onto those big things. So the key is that next level. And I mean, you look at a card. Look at this last card. It was amazing. There was 9 fights. Only a third of them were pros. Mm-hmm. Those other 6 are amateurs that we're committed to build up into pros. And hopefully they remember their good old friends at Fusion when they are pros and come back. But you need those younger guys. You need the Brady Needles and Jake Phelps and the Eric Sturchios and Jarrett Greffys to be your first couple fights of the night. Mm-hmm. So we, as an organization, try to commit to those amateurs as much as a pro. I hope the way we treat every fighter, you can't tell whether they're pro, ami, champ, or not. We try to treat everyone the same. We call it the Fusion family, and we reach out, we care, we do our best, and that's kind of philosophy that sets us apart from some other organizations, I think, is whether you're a debut or a 4-0 pro, I try to treat you the same.
Yeah. So, Tony Shirt says he loves this. He's been a fighter on your card before, hasn't he? Yep.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've known Tony way back. If he's commenting live now, right?
Yes.
Ask him if I can share the weigh-in story.
Hey Tony, can he share the weigh-in story for us? Well.
You let me know when he responds. But
okay,
I've got a Tony Shirt story.
Okay, sounds good. So So I tagged you in a post, and it was after Israel Adesanya makes his walkout, and then you comment, you're like, I can shut things down. It's like, so what? What do you think of whenever you get some young gun with an attitude? That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no. I love your attitude. I love the cockiness. I love the confidence in the cage. And you and I've had this conversation privately, and I'll have it here. That's great. That's marketable. That's what people do. As long as it's done respectfully, I'm all for that. But you got to remember when you're talking to the matchmaker, he's not your next opponent. Or talking to the promoter when you're talking to Terrell. He's not your next opponent. Like I said, I start with 60 names for every fight. I'd love to build up Kai Stewart, but if you become such a pain in the butt to deal with that it takes so much time and so much effort and hurts other fights and other efforts that we're making, there's plenty of other names that want on that card too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the main thing is I give people 2 or 3 fights to kind of learn a little bit, and I think you have become much more humble and much more professional since your first dealings with me. I think you'd agree with that. But that's what you do is you let them feel it out a little bit, but at some point you got to remind them, I need you to fight, but you need us to be able to fight too. And so it's got to be a symbiotic, respectful relationship both ways. Talk all the crap you want about your opponent and about your ability, but let's be respectful when you and I are talking.
Yep. So Tony said, go ahead on the...
Okay, so poor old Tony Hitman Shirts. He and Dylan Schulte were on the same card, and they video weigh-in. I think it was taken late, and they were working Friday night, so we did a video weigh-in. And there's a big process you have to follow. And Dylan Schulte did it first, and he's in a towel because he was barely making weight. And so he did it, and he flexed for the camera, and the towel dropped. And so I got an eyeful of Dylan Schulte. And so Tony was weighing in next, and Coach messaged me, Coach Aho says, are you ready for Tony? And I said, yeah, but tell him to tie the towel a little tighter than Schulte, if you would, please. And so Tony sends me the video, and if you know Tony, he's a class clown. I love Tony, but he's a class clown. And so he finishes, he says, made weight, he pulls up and flexes and has his teammates drop his towel intentionally, does the helicopter, the whole bit, thought it was hilarious. Well, then his opponent, Paul Valdez, asked me, hey, we're out eating, can I see his video? I want to see that he made weight. And you have to do that. If you tell me I need to see my opponent weigh in, we let that happen in person. So if they ask for the video, you have to do it. So I send him Tony's video. Well, Paul Valdez was the coach of Slap Happy MMA back in the day, which featured Paul Valdez, at the time Bradley McDonnell, who's out in Washington now, and 4 female fighters. Little did I know they were all at dinner together, and they all huddled around the phone to see if Tony made weight. Tony has said since then that Jim was cold that day, and don't blame him for it. But the entire table, including the 4 women, were watching to see if he made weight and saw more than they bargained for.
Oh, that is hilarious.
So I messaged Tony, I was like, just so you know. And so the next day, they're all together in the fighter meeting. Like, Tony's looking across at them, they're looking across at him, and we all know what had happened the day before. It was so hilarious. I've never seen Tony at a loss for words or embarrassed. I think that was the one moment where he might have been a little bit embarrassed in that fighter meeting.
Oh, that's pretty funny. So, Sean says, Kai is the best at being humble. Just ask him.
I love that you come out to humble, by the way. That's just great.
Yeah, at first I was going to have just some random, typical walkout song. And then, my friend was like, hey, listen to this song. And this is before I took my, in my head I always thought that I'd use the same song as my coach, Casey Park, used, Sugar Boom Boom, or something like that.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
But then my friend, before I even took my fight, he was like, hey, you should if you ever do MMA, you should walk out to this. I was like, perfect. Absolutely
it is,
perfect.
Too. It suits you so well. I will agree with that, yeah.
So, so whenever you put a card together, is there any, so from a matchmaker, okay, let's just do this. Matchmaker point of view, you have to be the most unbiased person you could possibly be.
Correct.
So, you have friends in the sport, you don't have friends in the sport, you have people that you'd probably love to see get their face beat in, you have people that you would be like, oh, I can't, that'd be rough to watch. How do you overcome that?
This sounds cold, but everyone's a number, man. I just look at this guy's 135. He's 4-2. He wants a title shot. He's from this gym, and you match him up by that. Once you match up, you're like, man, I hope so and so performs well. I hope he doesn't get hurt here. Those type of things. But I mean, to do my job right, everyone's a number. And that sounds horrible, but that's the only way to do it fair. Where I'm not setting up. Like, people know I'm friends with you, so I got to be careful that I match you in a good, fair fight. And, I probably am more careful and probably match you a little heavier than I should because I don't want that illusion of bias. So
I did straight up tell you, like, getting my first fight, I remember this is before you even knew me. And there was talk, and they said either one guy that he might not even accept it, but he's going to be an easier fighter, or we have this guy over here, and I was like, give me the tougher one, man.
Yep.
I mean, what's going to help? Like, and plus, I totally thought I was only going to do one fight, win or lose. I just wanted to get into a scrap. And then I actually did semi-decent in my first fight, so I was like, oh, maybe I can keep doing this. And then I was 0-1, went against a 6-5 fighter. I'm like, I love getting the tougher fights.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, too, that I tell people, and it's hard to imagine when you're in your position, but amateur records don't matter. They really don't. You're out there, you get experience, you learn how not to get caught, you learn what you're good at, those type of things. I always tell people, what's Conor McGregor's amateur record?
Yeah, you don't.
And without
know.
Google, you don't know, because it doesn't matter. It's what you do when you turn pro, and amateur's just about getting ready to turn pro.
Yeah, Tony Shirt says, I love the tough fight that they gave me. Tough fights that they gave him.
Oh, yeah, we gave Tony some real tough fights, and he took them every time. He took a fight no one else would take on short notice. He took Cody Jerome in kickboxing, and Cody is a beast, and Tony will be the first to tell you that. I mean, that guy's a monster in kickboxing and Muay Thai, and Tony went toe-to-toe with him. They got his bell run a couple times, but he went toe-to-toe with him. Tony's a tough customer, and he was our interim champion for a while at 145. He's a tough dude.
Did he fight in Havre? Did he fight in Havre?
Yep, that was against Cody Jerome.
That was
that main. Yep.
Oh, okay. I know you're watching, but dang, dude, your leg. Wow, you took some crazy hits. That was wild.
But he kept coming forward. That's Tony, man.
I know, there was no quit there.
No.
So
thanks to a fault.
Yeah. So if you if you look at the UFC, people say, "Oh, what's the most in-depth weight class?" What would you say is one of the top weight classes for Fusion?
135's real good. It's been traditionally the heavier. It was 170, 185, 205 for a long time, but now it's the 125, 135, 155. That jiu-jitsu class. You better not come in there just as a wrestler or just as a striker, or you're going to be hurting. That 155 there's some beasts there.
Dang.
And 135 too. You've talked about going there. You're at 145, but you've talked about going there. Chris Honeybee Wagner's no joke. Nate Strenning is no joke, our current champ. There's a lot of people at that weight class that you don't want to scrap with either.
Yeah, I talked with Chris Wagner. I'm sure he's gonna watch this eventually. If I can make weight, even we talked a little bit, and we both respect each other, but we know that it would also be a good show, and we were just like, hey, want to scrap, bro?
Well, and you both want a title shot, and sooner or later you got to go through each other to get there. Chris has been kind of a gatekeeper for us. We had another young fighter, not going to call him out, that wanted a title shot after her first fight, and Chris fought him and kind of showed him he needed to work his way up, and he did, and he's a title contender now. So Chris takes that gatekeeper role on very nicely.
Yeah, we even talked way before titles or anything. I think you commented Stewart versus Wagner, and then I said, yeah, and there's a possibility that after college season I won't be able to make it down all that way. So
right.
So if he ever wanted to meet in the middle, go 40s. I'd do it just because we both respect each other, but it'd just be it would be a wrestler versus wrestler. It would be a scrap.
Yeah, that almost would have to be a stand-up fight just because of the wrestling pedigree of both you guys. Yeah, it'd be a great fight.
So, getting closer to the end here, I was just gonna ask, if you're what would you say Montana is for fighters known for? Are they known for wrestling?
Toughness. Let's not even talk about technique, because we've got strikers. James Dennis will turn your lights out quicker than a switch. We've got wrestlers who've won title after title. Tommy, yourself. I mean, we got bad wrestlers all the way through. We've talked about the jiu-jitsu guys. We've got it all. But what it really, really is to me is that toughness and that no quit, that grit attitude. It's the Montana, the Idaho way. The fighters from both places are very similar. I think our area, you're going to have to put a guy out. If you want to finish the fight, you're not going to break them. You got to put a guy out.
So, do you, like, I personally feel this, but, like, if I'm ever talking to anybody and they go, sorry, so Tony Shirts, he must have came in late, asked if Dylan Schulte's okay from last night, and I, yes, we said we got a message earlier on.
He messaged me. He said he's doing all right and he's okay. Can't release any medical information, but he did personally tell me he's okay, Tony.
So, would you say that Montana fighters in general are kind of looked down on, and like it's harder for like us to get known?
In the past, it's a small state. It's one of those places where you kind of expect it to be overlooked because they're not fighting the competition they are in California or whatever. But we broke through that ceiling, and you got to look at guys: Leo Bercier, Lloyd Cupcake Woodard, Tim Welch, Sugar Sean O'Malley. Tommy McMillan now, Hunter Azure, who's been in our cage and fought in Havre in front of a home crowd. Those guys are or have been in UFC, Bellator, LFA. Theron Martin's fought on LFA. Tyler Vogel's out there making a name for himself in different big promotions. I think we showed that Montanans can hold their own in big promotions, and I think now you're seeing the opposite. We used to be overlooked, and now those big gyms, the Fight Readies, the MMA Labs, America Top Team. I know we've got some folks out in California that went to big gyms there. I think you're seeing those people now calling and saying, who's the next Montanan? Get him down here. Dylan Dribdall's that way. Tommy, like I said, I think you're seeing a lot of these young guys move to these big gyms, and they're looking for them. Mm-hmm. So I think it's the other way now. I think Montana's looked to for the next generation of fighters instead of being looked over. And that's because of, again, Leo Bercier, Lloyd Woodard, Tim Welch. Those guys deserve a ton of credit. Sean O'Malley took it to the next level. Now Dylan and Tommy are going to the next stage with Hunter as well. Probably even missing people. There's so many Montana fighters that I'm probably missing them when it used to be try to name one that was on TV. Now I'm probably missing them. It's amazing.
Yeah. So, like one or two more things left. So one, we got to get those pictures from the fights out.
Yep. We're working behind because we had so many fights in a row, doing so many things. Those are coming. I've actually been working on them this weekend, and they're coming pretty soon. You'll see some photos up in the next couple days, and then I hope to have all of our back ones up by the weekend. So you'll see them coming.
All right. So what is next for you and Fusion Fight League?
We got seasons beginning in December in Billings, and then we kind of take a couple months for our big ones next spring. So I think you'll see some big things. We're working on a pro heavyweight tournament, which will kick off in December, which will be really, really good. But, Terrell's the one to tell you what's next. I do matches. I take my marching orders and do what I can to help him. This company's his vision. It's his thing. Fusion wouldn't even exist without Terrell, and he's the reason we're doing what we are doing. So get him on the podcast. Ask him what's next so that I know what's coming, and we'll go from there. But I think you'll see some big things from us and from our fighters. And one more thing. I told you this off, but I told you I'd tell you on air too. James Dennis, we talked about a little bit. You got to get that dude on. He's got a story. I'm not going to tell his story for him, but he's come through some pretty strong adversity. He found fighting. He found championships. He found faith. And the story he has is better than anything I've told you in the last hour. So get him on here. Hopefully we got more views than Casey last week, so I can tell Casey I'm more popular than him. But James will crush anything we did because that guy's got a story, and he's amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on, and I look forward to doing some talk with you later on.
Yeah, I appreciate you for having me on, Kai. I hope people found it interesting, saw us peel back the curtain. If anyone wants to get into fighting, contact your local gyms. That's the first thing. Be a gym fighter. There's great gyms in Montana. Grindhouse, Wolfpack, Dog Pound, SBG, TPG in Helena. and I'm missing some, lots in Butte, lots of good gyms all around the state. So find a gym, contact me after that. If you see this and you are someone with experience and you want to get in our cage, Kai will tell you our shows are pretty awesome. Get a hold of me and we'll do what we can.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and have a good night.
You too. Thanks, Kai, for the time.
Yep, see you later.